This is Mark Dell with Android Spin, and this review is for Illusia by Gameville. The mixture of platformer and RPG isn't a common one, and while this small genre is perhaps best known for its Paper Marios and Castlevanias, Illusia has a different tone that might be familiar to those who have played Gameville's Xenonia series. RPGs can tend to be long games, so let me preface this review by saying that after 5 to 6 hours of gameplay I've only seen about the first half of the game, and you can choose to make of this what you will. Illusia's gameplay can also potentially extend past the 7 worlds. With 2 major classes to select, different difficulties and a rush mode, you can't really argue that you're not getting enough hours content for your $5, assuming you enjoy the content that's presented to you. While the game itself is relatively long, it achieves its longevity through a lot of grinding and backtracking. Each world is made up from a series of small areas, and you'll have to trek to and from your given quest through many screens of creatures and platforms. One such point has a town elder reading a list of ingredients that he needs, and rather than giving you multiple quests, or the list, he'll send you backwards and forwards through the same areas countless times to kill specific creatures and then return with their hides. All the time spent going across the levels isn't wasted, however. You'll want to spend your travelling time knocking out some enemies along the way, so you can level up and put their loot to good use, whether you equip it, sell it to an NPC, or put it up for sale in the online marketplace. Most of the loot you find is useless, and you won't be swapping out your items too often, but being able to store and trade your items online is both welcome and unexpected. Each class has their own selection of items that they'll find and be able to use, which will also adjust their appearance. The 2 main classes of Fighter and Magician play very differently from each other, with one being more focused on close-up combos, while the other relies on the tactical long-range attacks. As you progress in the story, you can take subclasses and differentiate your character even further, with new and passive active skills that you can begin to level up along with your regular stats. While killing foes is a fine way of leveling up and collecting loot, you'll also have a fair selection of sub-quests that can be completed, some of which are repeatable should you be running short on cash. The art style in Illusia shows off very well. It's a clean 16-bit style that shows off some great effects on occasion when you're pulling off some spells or slashing in with a great combo. However, beyond the graphical style, there's some glaring presentation issues. It doesn't feel as if Illusia was ever developed with a touchscreen in mind, much less Android. All of the buttons on your device will serve no purpose, so you'll have to use the on-screen menu button. Sure, this occurs on most iOS ports, but it's still a big pet peeve. Menus have to be navigated using an on-screen directional pad rather than tapping headings and arrows, which also isn't a unique issue, but it feels rather hokey. Other slightly stranger issues occur practically any time you're presented with text. Rather than wrapping the text in the message boxes at spaces, the text wraps mid-word as if you're using an old word processor from the 1980s. The sound also has one rather large problem. Each level's own tune is only about 30 seconds long and stuck on a loop. And even though the tune itself is just fine, it'll drive you crazy just as quickly as you'd expect. Although fortunately there is a mute option. Illusia gets its combat right, and it's just as fun to dive in and slash up foes with a fighter as it is to lay down some well-timed spells with a magician. And the RPG elements are as equally well performed, as long as you can look past the constant backtracking. With all these great elements, it's a real shame that the controls let down the other parts of the game. Walking left to right and getting into fights is no problem, but as soon as the game relies on you jumping between collapsing or moving platforms, everything goes horribly wrong. Most of the jumps you'll come across should be a piece of cake to traverse, but an accidental double tap of a direction will dart you too far off course, and any kind of precise movement is near impossible to complete due to the delay in response of the controls. With any luck, some kind of fix will come in for the control issues through an update, but until then you'll have to be prepared for some rather frustrating moments. Control issues aside, Illusia is a fantastic action RPG. The combat is fun, and the variety of the customization extends far further than you'd expect from a game that begins with only a couple of selectable classes. If you've enjoyed the Xenonia games that Gameville has released previously, and you fancy a bit of sideways action, then you should give Illusia a look.